Hello dear students, welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. So today is 6th of April 2024 and in this lecture we will discuss few important news articles in a very detailed manner. So before discussing all those important news articles, let's try to solve yesterday's given practice question. So the question was, Clean Energy Transition Program CETP is an ambitious effort to accelerate global clean energy transitions, and this is an initiative of which of the following agencies? So the correct answer for this question is option D, International Energy Agency. Now International Energy Agency is tasked with clean energy transition program. So clean energy transition is actually means that replacing the existing fossil fuels with the clean energies such as renewable energies, that includes the hydrogen energy. So therefore that would result in lesser emissions, and lesser emissions are actually means that it will not increase or enhance the existing levels of global warming, and that will also significantly reduces the impact of climate change on the global environment. So today's question is, in which of the following states Papikonda National Park is situated? So the options: A. Karnataka, B. Odisha, C. Andhra Pradesh, and D. Tamil Nadu. So please answer this question in the comment section, and the correct answer for this question I'll be giving you in the next lecture or tomorrow's lecture. So let's try to look at some important news articles. So these articles are very relevant for mains examination, so therefore we will try to discuss them in a very detailed manner. So first article was, there will be no independent or sovereign Palestine. So this is with respect to a recent dispute or issue or conflict between Israel and Palestine, and how it is going to impact the rest of the world, and how other players are also started involving in this particular conflict. And secondly, we will also understand calling Chinese bluff. So this was also an editorial that was given in the Hindu newspaper, so and the Indian Express newspaper. So in this we will understand how Chinese renaming of cities in Arunachal Pradesh or certain places in Arunachal Pradesh will actually impact India and China relations. How Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar recently visited Philippines, and how it is going to shape India-China relations, and that is what we will be understanding in this lecture. So apart from the mains relevant news articles, we also have some prelims bites also. So firstly, we will compare the Bengaluru's water crisis with Cape Town water crisis. Cape Town is a city in South Africa, so we will compare the water crisis or the water stress in both these cities. Secondly, we will also understand what exactly is the green energy and what are various opportunities and significant challenges that the green energy or green hydrogen is very often associated with. So let's try to discuss today's first important news article. So that is, there will be no independent and sovereign Palestine. So we all know that Palestine and Israel conflict is one of the longest conflicts in the entire world history. So Palestine has been fighting against Israel for its existence in the Middle East, and at the same time Israel is also occupying more and more land that is belong to Palestine, so further fragmenting and further marginalizing the Palestinian territory. However, there was an armed group, we all know about that, this particular armed group known as Hamas, and that this is associated with the Palestine. So Hamas, an armed group, or now it is called as a terrorist group, has launched an attack on Israel. So when it has launched an attack on Israel in 2023 October, so that led to the killing of a lot of civilians in Israel. And in fact, many countries have called it an act of terrorism, because there are a lot of civilian casualties, and it is not a declaration of war by Hamas terrorist group on Israel. So earlier there were some hopes that a two-state solution would be possible, two-state solution would be possible. So two-state solution actually means that now both Israel and Palestine have been fighting with each other, right? So in this context, two-state solution is provided to make sure that two states, both Palestine and Israel, can coexist together. And in fact, India is also subscribed to the idea of two-state solution. In fact, a lot of global or international community has been actively supporting the two-state solution in this conflict between Israel and Palestine. So however, after Hamas attacked Israel, there is no doubt that two-state solution would not be possible in the near future, because now Israel has been started taking the retaliatory actions against the action of Hamas. So because of that reason, most of the countries either not supporting this two-state solution, and even Israel is also not ready to support this particular two-state solution. However, if you look at the civilian authority in Palestine, the civilian authority is considered as more moderate authority. According to the author, the civilian authority in Palestine is moderate in nature, and the civilian authority is very often supporting the two-state solution as well as the peaceful coexistence of both Israel and Palestine. However, in contrast to the civilian authority, the Hamas has been demanding the outright withdrawal of all Israeli settlements from the Palestinian territory. So this is also an armed group. When it has launched an attack on Israeli civilians, Hamas has got a lot of support from both West Bank and Gaza Strip. Both West Bank and Gaza Strip. So in case elections takes place in West Bank and Gaza Strip, then there is a higher probability that Hamas could come to the power, and that could further complicate the existing situation, because Israel will continue its resistance against Hamas, and Hamas will also launch its attacks on Israel. So thereby there will be no two-state solution and there will be no sovereign Palestine, and this is what the author has been interpreting here. And apart from that, if you look at the Hamas as a militant group, so still it has a lot of hostages with it. And apart from that, Israel has also continuously bombarding the Rafah border crossing. However, most of the people in Israel is of the opinion that Hamas should be completely eradicated. Only then this two-state solution would be a possible step. Okay, so most of the people have this opinion that Hamas should be completely eradicated. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying that he can achieve both the objectives, securing the release of all the hostages from Hamas, and at the same time completely eradicating the Hamas by the action by Israeli defense forces. So this is what the Israel has been saying. But on the other hand, the popularity of Hamas has been significantly increasing in both West Bank and Gaza Strip in the Palestinian territory. So therefore, each other have been contrasting with each other, and therefore in this context there will be no independent and sovereign Palestine, and this is what the author has been suggesting here. And in fact, it is said that recently other players were also entered into this particular scenario. So we all know that another armed group called Hezbollah has started extending its support to the Hamas terrorist group. So in fact, if you look at the Hamas terrorist group, so this is a Sunni terrorist group or Sunni militia, and Hezbollah is actually a Shia militant group. Now apart from Hezbollah, so Houthis, you very often come across Houthis also. So Houthis were very well known in Yemen, right? So they frequently launch attacks on Saudi Arabia. In fact, both Hezbollah and Houthis have been supported by the Iran regime, because Iran is a Shia majority country or Shia country. So therefore both Houthis and Hezbollah are Shia terrorist or armed groups, and Iran has been actively supporting both Houthis and Hezbollah. And it is also very surprising that these Shia groups, Houthis and Hezbollah, extending the Sunni group called Hamas. So both are in conflict with each other, but now they are extending support to the Hamas, a Sunni group also. And in fact, it is said that in Lebanon, Hezbollah has a lot of rockets ready to fire on Israeli territory. So that could further threaten the entire peace in the region. So in case all those countries in the Middle East started attacking the Israel, there is a very high probability that US would also enter into this particular region to support Israel, because now most of the countries in Middle East, along with those armed groups, have been looking for a right opportunity to attack Israel, and they may find that this is the right opportunity so that they can attack Israel. So if that happens, US will enter into the scene, and US will actively support the Israel. And there is also a probability that when US enter, the other powers such as Russia will also enter into this particular war, and that could further escalate the existing situation. So therefore, this is what the author has been suggesting in a nutshell. However, on the other hand, we need to find out a solution to this war or to this conflict. So when we found out a solution for the ongoing conflict, the two-state solution would be possible, and peace and stability can be established in the region. However, further escalation of the existing conflict will lead to the unimagined consequences where all the powers might intervene in the region, and that could further threaten the peace and stability of the region. And this is what the author has been emphasizing in this article. So let's try to look at some important points what the author has been talked about. So firstly, there are diminished prospects for a two-state solution or an independent and sovereign Palestinian state, because despite there are a lot of negotiations and attempts to establish a two-state solution. So earlier in 2001, almost all parties have agreed, or there was a consensus with respect to the two-state solution. Okay, so there was a likelihood of an independent Palestinian state remains a very bleak, despite a lot of negotiations, and in fact there were attempts to establish a two-state solution. Why? Because of both Hamas and Israel conflict has been further escalating the prospects of further deteriorating the existing prospects of creating a two-state solution. And in fact, there is an erosion of support for the Palestinian cause, because most of the countries were seen the attack of Hamas on Israeli civilians is an act of terrorism. So therefore, the rising popularity of Hamas, a militant group opposed to the Israel's own existence, and that will not be possible, because if they threaten the Israel's existence and if they declare a war on Israel, there is a probability that countries like US will also intervene in this war. Okay, so there will be a spillover effect of this war in other regions also. And apart from that, there is also a credibility crisis in this region. So when I say the credibility crisis, if you look at the Palestinian authorities' perceived corruption, that is Palestinians' civilian authority is very often perceived as a corrupt and inefficient government, right? So they are not doing anything for the survival of Palestine or for the betterment of the Palestinians. So therefore, it has undermined their legitimacy and making the emergence of moderate Palestinian government improbable. So even if election takes place, there is a probability that Hamas would probably win the elections, and that could have a further negative or unintended consequences. And apart from that, there is also a probability that regional actors might intervene in this war. And this conflict's complexity is compounded by the involvement of regional actors. As I have already told you that a Shia militant group called Hezbollah in Lebanon is ready to support the Hamas group, and at the same time they even ready to fire rockets into Israeli territory. Okay, so that can pose a significant threat to the Israel. All right, so escalation of risk will be another probability in this war, because the conflict's potential to escalate into a broader regional conflict, so that involves Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and possibly Egypt also. So that actually heightens the risk of instability in the region, because all the countries in the Middle East are looking for the right opportunity to wipe out Israel from the Middle East. And they may find that this is the right time that they can attack in a combined manner on Israel. So they can launch an attack on Israel. Okay, so that could have a potential risk of further escalating the existing conflict, and that could have the spillover effects on the other regions also. And after that, recently we have seen the continued hostilities also. So despite there were lot of international efforts to secure a ceasefire, so the ongoing hostilities persist. Israel defense forces continues to attack the Hamas terrorist hideouts. Okay, so therefore these hostilities are continuing, and they have been driving the existing geopolitical dynamics and entrenched the existing grievances also. So therefore in this scenario the solution looks bleak, and at the same time the independent and sovereign Palestine in future would not be possible. Earlier there were negotiations and there were agreements to establish two states which can live peacefully, but due to further escalation of the existing issue, it may be further impacting the existing two-state solution also. So let's try to discuss the next very important news article, that is with respect to calling Chinese or China's bluff. So we all have some basic idea that China is very often claims Arunachal Pradesh as their territory. Arunachal Pradesh is part of their territory. However, India has a sovereign control over the Arunachal Pradesh, and in fact India very often says that Arunachal Pradesh is will and will always be part of India. Okay, so this is inalienable part of India. So however, Chinese frequently renaming different places in Arunachal Pradesh is actually confronting attitude of China. So it reflects the confronting attitude of China. So why? Because Arunachal Pradesh is a sovereign territory which is under the government of India's control, but China naming the places in Arunachal Pradesh without any logical and rational argument or rational basis is something which has been showing its confronting attitude in the region. So apart from that, if you look at India-China relations, not just the Arunachal Pradesh, but we have seen confrontations at the Galwan Valley in the year 2020, and apart from Galwan Valley we have also seen clashes at Doklam between India and China. So these things between a regular crisis between India and Chinese forces, and its assertiveness and its aggressiveness on the borders is something which is concerning India. And if you look at China, Chinese presence in India's neighborhood has been significantly increasing. So if you look at Sri Lanka, in Sri Lanka also recently they have sent surveillance ships, and apart from that the Hambantota port is also leased by Sri Lanka to Chinese. The Chinese naval presence has been substantially increased in recent times. In fact, in Maldives also, Chinese presence, with the change in regime in Maldives, Chinese presence is expected to increase. So that overall increases the maritime presence or maritime surveillance activities by China in the Indian Ocean region. So it is looking to confront India in the region by further increasing its surveillance. And in fact, if you look at the China-Pakistan economic corridor that has been passing through the sovereign or Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So the Pakistan occupied Kashmir is part of India, and this has been violating India's sovereignty, and China is not paying any heed to the India's concerns. And because of that reason, India was not part of Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. So India was not part of the Belt and Road Initiative because China has been violating the sovereignty. And not just Sri Lanka, Maldives, but also in Pakistan. So they have developed a port. For example, they have developed Gwadar port in Pakistan, and in fact their presence in Bangladesh and even Myanmar has been substantially increasing. So this is recognized with a strategy called string of pearls strategy. So this string of pearls strategy is actually encircling India, further enhancing or increasing its maritime presence and naval presence. And along with the encircling India, they also making aggressive and most assertive claims over the India's borders. Okay, so these are some of the concerns that we have been facing with respect to China. However, the other issue is that the South China Sea issue. So we all know that in South China Sea, China has maritime disputes with several countries such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, right? So a frequent confrontations in the South China Sea between India and these nations is regularly making into the headlines. So recently, in March last week, our External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar had a visit to Philippines. So in that particular visit, S. Jaishankar has raised the issue of the aggression of China in the South China Sea. And in fact, he assured Philippines of India's support against this aggression. However, to this, China reacted sharply. So China reacted sharply, saying that India has been trying to intervene in the bilateral relationship between India and other countries, and India is also trying to lead the countries which have the negative relations with China. So therefore, in this context, it is not true that India has been leading the countries which have the conflictual relations with China. That is not true. So why? Because the South China Sea dispute, India is very often advocating that it should be based on the UN clause, United Nations Convention on Law of Seas. So earlier in 2016 also there was a judgment from the Hague based permanent court. So that has also given its judgment in favor of Philippines with respect to the maritime dispute between China and Philippines. However, China disregarded this judgment by the Hague court, and China has also disregarded the United Nations Convention on Law of Seas. However, India's support to Philippines is actually based on the rules-based international order. However, China disregarding the judgment that is being delivered by the permanent court is not as per the rules-based order, because India is a responsible power and it always upholds the rules-based international order. So therefore, in this context, India has extended its support to Philippines. So in fact, Philippines and India are also maintaining the best of the best relations. However, apart from this, China has also warned that External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar visits to Philippines is not actually a diplomatic visit. So this is a visit where S. Jaishankar directly talked about Chinese aggression and potential threats that China faces, China will create in the region. So that has been a concerning factor, and in fact China has strongly reacted to this. China saying that this will have a huge negative consequences on India-China relations in the future. But it is not true that India always respect the rules-based international order, because India is a responsible power, and India also signaled that it wanted to intervene in those disputes. Now first, our development and growth would be a silent growth. We will not intervene directly in any dispute or any conflict. Once we become militarily superior, and once we become economic superpower, then we can intervene in these disputes, because when we intervene in those disputes, so that will provide us some leverage. So it sent a signal that India can be able to protect its interests, and at the same time India can also come to the aid and help of other countries, other weaker countries. Remember, India is well known as the leader of the global south. India is known as the leader of global south. So therefore, in this context, the S. Jaishankar's assurances to Philippines are a welcome move from Indian side. So now we'll try to understand this in a very brief manner. So as I have already told you that the geographical renaming by China of several places in Arunachal Pradesh. So see, remember, Arunachal Pradesh is called by China as Jiangnan. So this was the name that China has given to the Arunachal Pradesh, and in fact the naming of different places in Arunachal Pradesh was started by China in 2017, and it's continuing the naming of different places in Arunachal Pradesh since then. For example, in 2021 also China named few places, and 2023 also China named few places in Arunachal Pradesh, and recently also it has named few places in the Arunachal Pradesh. So this is also part of the confrontation from the Chinese side, because we all know that Arunachal Pradesh is an inalienable part of India, has and will always be part of India. So even then, China frequently renaming places in Arunachal Pradesh, that doesn't make any sense. And apart from that, if you look at the strategic intent of China, China's renaming tactics are actually reflecting its long-term strategy. So the long-term strategy of China is asserting its territorial influence using the historical narratives as a tool for expansion and influence. Right? So it is very often using this territorial expansion narrative or making absurd territorial claims using the historical narratives. So these historical narratives are actually make no sense. Okay, for example, Arunachal Pradesh is being renamed by China, making a claim that their ancestors' graves were found in Arunachal Pradesh. And apart from that, the people of China have the right to pay respect to the graves in Arunachal Pradesh. Because of that reason, Arunachal Pradesh belongs to China. So this is something which is considered as a very absurd claim from China to assert its territorial claim over Arunachal Pradesh. And after that, if you look at some historical claims, as I have already told you, that Chinese historical assertions such as invoking Zheng He and claiming ancestral graves in Arunachal Pradesh actually demonstrating its utilization of history to justify the territorial ambitions and influence the overall public perception in their respective countries. And in fact, these territorial assertions also benefit the Chinese ruling Communist Party, also divert the attention of the people away from the local issues or domestic issues. So that benefits the government in China. And apart from that, what was the India's response to the renaming of the names in Arunachal Pradesh, renaming of different places in Arunachal Pradesh? So India has also strongly reacted to this. So India has outrightly dismissed the renaming of names in Arunachal Pradesh. Okay, so India firmly rejected Chinese renaming attempts in Arunachal Pradesh, emphasizing that India's sovereignty over the region. So we all know that India has been enjoying the sovereignty over the region, all right. So therefore, in this context, China making renaming places in Arunachal Pradesh doesn't make any sense. So after that, we should also talk about the strategic diplomacy from the Chinese, from the Indian side. So as I have already told you that S. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, recently had a visit to Philippines. And this particular visit is actually signaling a departure from India's traditional non-interventionist stance. We all know that generally India will not intervene in any dispute or any conflict. But this recent visit is special because India has started its interventionist stance, okay, by expressing support for Philippines in South China Sea against China. Okay, so in South China Sea dispute, India will support the Philippines against China, and that is what the External Affairs Minister have made it clear. So India always advocates the rules-based international order because India has committed to the rules-based international order. And in fact, the United Nations Convention on Law of Seas 1982 clearly says that the maritime rights over the South China Sea, few parts in the South China Sea belong to the Philippines. But China has been disregarding to the UN clause and the judgment of the Hague-based court also. Because in 2016, Hague-based Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling was invalidated by China, making absurd claims on South China Sea as well. Okay, so that has not paid regard to the the permanent court's arbitration with respect to the South China Sea. So Chinese response to India's position, what was the Chinese response in this context? So Chinese reaction was India's stance accusing India of seeking embroil other nations in conflict with China and warning of negative consequences for India-China relations. Okay, so China has said that India is seeking to embroil other nations in conflict with China, those countries which already have conflict with China, and India is trying to seek embroil them. And in fact, China has also warned of negative consequences of India-China relations if it further continues. Followed by that, India's responsible role, that is also what we need to understand here. So in fact, India has reiterated its commitment to peace, stability and credibility. Okay, so India always committed to this in international relations and emphasizing adherence to the rules-based order and advocating for the diplomatic resolutions to the disputes. So India has never followed the confrontationist approach with respect to these disputes. However, India always advocates for the rules-based international order, and India always puts diplomacy at the forefront rather than the confrontation. So that has been proving that India always prefers, or India has a strong commitment for peace, stability and credibility in the region and beyond the region. However, India has also seek similar commitments from China, as evidenced from recent communications between Indian and Chinese leadership. So that has been emphasizing on peace, stability and adherence to the international norms. So that is what is very important. So peace, stability and credibility from the Chinese side is very important to improve India-China relations. So China must stop its confrontationist approach in the region because that could threaten peace and stability. So that could attract more and more outsiders coming into this region. So that could also have the potential implications on peace and stability in the region, and this is what the author has been emphasizing in this article. So next we will try to understand the Bengaluru and Cape Town, a tale of two cities hit by water scarcity. So we all know that recently Bengaluru has faced one of its worst water crisis. So this is particularly because of water shortage in Bengaluru. Where the normal people stand on queues, they stand on long queues to fetch water. So this particular water crisis or water shortage in Bengaluru reminds us the water crisis in a city called Cape Town. So this is a South African legislative capital. So remember, South Africa has different capital cities, and Cape Town is known as the legislative capital of South Africa. Right, so Cape Town in the period of 2015 and 2018 faced one of the worst water crisis. Right, so it has faced one of its worst water crisis, where people similar to Bengaluru started standing up in long queues to fetch the water. So there are multiple reasons for Cape Town facing such a severe water stress. So the reasons include below average rainfall in Cape Town. So below average rainfall has led to the emptying or drying up of existing reservoirs. So if it leads to the emptying of existing reservoirs, those reservoirs will not be able to supply enough water for the drinking water purposes. And secondly, Cape Town is known as emerging city, right? So it was known as an emerging city. However, the unplanned urbanization and industrialization, which has been using the excessive amounts of the underground water or the groundwater resources, and without recycling the water and just releasing the water into other water resources, that has led to the contamination and pollution of existing water resources, making water as a scarce resource in Cape Town city. So in fact, it is said that 3 years Cape Town city has faced one of its worst water crisis. However, it is fortunately now Cape Town has recovered from its water crisis because of good rainfall in the city, and at the same time better water management practices, and those water management practices are also very important for the sustainable management of existing water resources. However, the experts have been comparing the Cape Town water crisis or water scarcity with the recent Bengaluru water crisis. Now we'll understand what are the major reasons for the water crisis in Bengaluru. So there are certain reasons which are actually responsible for the current water crisis. So first and foremost reason is increasing population, along with that the unplanned urbanization. Now if you look at the urban areas, they are very well known as concrete jungles or concrete forests. So these concrete forests very often make the seepage of the rainwater and recharging groundwater tables would not be a possible thing in these urban centers, because the concrete would prevent the seepage or percolation of the rainwater and recharging the groundwater table. However, if you look at the cities like Bengaluru, there are a lot of industries and a lot of commercial buildings and residential buildings. They used to exploit a lot of water resources throughout the year. But on the other hand, if you look at the attempts to recharge these groundwater tables is a very less. So that has been breaching the existing carrying capacity of natural water regeneration in this Bengaluru city. And apart from that, in 1800s, it is estimated that Bengaluru has around 1,500 different water bodies within the city, and 80% of the city is covered with the green cover. 80% of the city has green cover and it has around 1500 water bodies. However, if you compare this number with present years, that Bengaluru has less than 120 water bodies, and in fact less than 20% of its total area is under green cover. So that has also created a lot of challenges with respect to the current water crisis, because when you have these water bodies, so they can act as a sponges to absorb the excess flood. Okay, so that could prevent the recent Bengaluru floods also. So they can act like a sponges and absorbing those floods, and at the same time they play a very important role in recharging the underground water tables. So recharging the underground water tables are also very important to maintain a constant flow of water resources. And in fact, the Kaveri Basin is said to be one of the major source of water for Bengaluru. However, the Kaveri Basin has been receiving a very less rainfall in recent times. So it has been receiving the below average rainfall, and that has impacted the water resources in Bengaluru. So in fact, the urbanization and increasing population, as I have already explained to you, is also further aggravating the existing situation. And since there's a below average rainfall, the water availability in reservoirs is also very less, and that has been leading to the present water crisis in Bengaluru. So according to the government estimates, it is said that there are around 13,600 bore wells, out of which around 6,300 bore wells were actually not working in Bengaluru, and that has also indicating that enough groundwater is not available in Bengaluru city. Okay, so however, one thing that we need to understand, the administration and the water providers, the Jal board, were actually optimistic that this is not water crisis. This is not a water crisis, rather this is a water shortage, and it is a temporary phenomenon, and very in a near future we would be able to solve this water shortage, and we will be able to resume the supply of adequate quantity of water for the people of Bengaluru. So this is what the authorities have been saying. But on the other hand, one thing that you need to understand, it has a lot of impact on Bangalore poor population. So poor were the worst sufferers of this present water shortage. However, in this context, we must remember water harvesting is very important. And every building, commercial building, industrial building, they must have water harvesting structures, and the existing industries must use the recycled and treated water, so that the water use efficiency in those industries can be achieved. So they cannot exploit a huge quantities of water. Secondly, we should also rejuvenate the existing water bodies in the Bengaluru city. So we need to improve the green cover as well. And also we should also improve the existing Kaveri basin and prevent any encroachments in this particular Kaveri basin, and that is also very important. And water management, sustainable water management practices among the people is also very important to prevent the wasteful usage of water resources. So in fact, if we do not adopt these practices, so this will be the situation for every city in India in coming 5 years or 6 years, because water resources are heavily contaminated and polluted across India. So that is what we need to curb at this moment of time. So the next important news article is with respect to the green hydrogen. Okay, so green hydrogen push. So the government is actually planning to develop the green hydrogen infrastructure in the country. green hydrogen based vehicles, especially the green hydrogen based heavy vehicles. So we all know that green hydrogen is very often considered as a clean fuel. So this is considered as a clean fuel because it does not come up with any emissions. Only water will be the end product, and it will also significantly reduces the levels of pollution in the atmosphere also. So when it reduces emissions and pollution, that will also help countries like India meet its climate obligations or climate commitments, and that are very important. For example, we have Panchamrit commitments. We have nationally determined contributions from Indian side, and we also have the Panchamrit commitments. So therefore those things are very important. And at the same time, the other thing we need to understand, India has heavily dependent on import of fossil fuels from other countries. It is said that 85% of the total fossil fuels are actually imported from other countries. So in order to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and also reduce its negative impact on the environment through emissions and pollutions, the government is planning to focus on the green hydrogen, promotion of green hydrogen. If you can remember, the government has also launched National Green Hydrogen Mission. National Green Hydrogen Mission to specially promote green hydrogen in the transportation sector and for other alternative uses. So in this context, hydrogen is different types. Okay, for example, firstly we need to talk about the gray hydrogen. Okay, so gray hydrogen is actually hydrogen which is manufactured by using fossil fuels. Okay, so this is manufactured using fossil fuels such as natural gas. Since natural gas is being used to produce hydrogen, this also come up with certain kind of emissions into the atmosphere. So therefore we cannot consider gray hydrogen as a green fuel. So after that, we should talk about the blue hydrogen. Blue hydrogen. So this blue hydrogen is actually sourced from the fossil fuels such as natural gas. Okay, so fossil fuels such as natural gas is being used to produce the blue hydrogen. However, even though natural gas is being used to produce blue hydrogen, the emissions are being captured and stored in this method. So that is carbon sequestration. So since carbon sequestration is being done through advanced technologies, the emissions are considered as zero in this method. However, carbon capture and storage is very often cost incentive for the private companies, cost incentive for the governments also. So after that, the green hydrogen. Green hydrogen comes with zero emissions. So it comes with the zero emissions. Why zero emissions? Because now in gray hydrogen, fossil fuel such as natural gas is being used, and it also comes with several emissions. In blue hydrogen, natural gas is being used. However, the emissions are being captured and stored. With respect to green hydrogen, we will not use any fossil fuels, rather we use electricity which is being produced from the renewable energy resources. Okay, so electricity, that is renewable energy resources, will be used to separate hydrogen from water. To separate hydrogen from water through a process called electrolysis. So this particular process will be used to separate hydrogen from the water, and that is known as green hydrogen because it does not come up with any emissions, and we are also using the renewable energy resources. So please understand, in gray hydrogen we can produce hydrogen, and blue hydrogen also we can produce hydrogen, and green hydrogen also we can produce hydrogen. So hydrogen is similar, but the method of producing hydrogen is different in each of these methods. However, it has certain opportunities and challenges also. Okay, so what are those opportunities and challenges? We will try to understand them. First and foremost, we have to talk about the opportunities side. So the opportunities are, firstly, it reduces emissions, and also it will be non-polluting and eco-friendly in nature. Non-polluting and eco-friendly in nature. and it will also reduce India's dependence on fossil fuels significantly. So after that, if you look at the battery vehicles, compared to the battery vehicles, these hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are lightweight in nature. So they are so capable as the diesel engine vehicles, especially the heavy vehicles. But on the other hand, due to higher battery weight, they're not equivalent in terms of capacity similar to the existing diesel vehicles. That could result in compromising the capacity of those vehicles which are being made with the batteries. But on the other hand, these hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles are actually having a higher capacity similar to the diesel vehicles because the lower weight of the hydrogen fuel. So these are some opportunities. So that could be leveraged by private companies in manufacturing the engines which can be able to combust themselves with the help of the hydrogen fuel. But on the other hand, when we talk about the challenges in the hydrogen fuel, so it has certain challenges such as transportation, storage, and at present we do not have the cylinders which can store the hydrogen, because hydrogen is very often stored in high pressure. So it requires higher pressure compared to CNG, natural gas, and those things. And because of this reason, the cylinders are also not available, and transportation and storage is also not easy. And at the same time, there are a lot of safety issues, handling issues, precautions have to be taken because it can easily flammable. So that is another factor. And apart from that, we need to talk about the affordability aspect also. So if you compare the affordability of the hydrogen fuel with the existing CNG and other fuels, so it is very costly. So we should further improve technologies, enhance the production capacities, and reduce the costs of green hydrogen, and that is very important in this context because affordability of hydrogen will further incentivize the existing private companies which are interested in producing or manufacturing hydrogen. So these are some challenges and opportunities with respect to the hydrogen fuel, and that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. And please like the video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much.